every day I'm a developer at Devante, which is e-commerce software house, and mainly I'm working on Vue Storefront, which, if you don't know, is a pretty neat front end for all the web shop backends. So Magento, WooCommerce, everything you want, you can put in the backend, and it works great. But it's not talk about Vue Storefront this time, it's talk about PWA, so please raise your hands. Who knows what PWA is? I'm pretty happy that most of you knows it. A tip, it's mostly about the progressive world in progressive web apps. And when I asked that question and get some answers, some of them are pretty okay, like a website that you can install on mobile phone and just use like a native app, or a website that you can use offline, an app that is capable of interacting with users with push notifications. There are also some worse one, like any single page application or web application that has server-side rendering. But let's hear what MDN says about PWA. And MDM actually says that progressive web apps use modern web APIs along with traditional progressive enhancement strategy to create cross-platform web applications. These apps work everywhere and provide several features to give them the same user experience advantages as native apps. So how to make your app progressive, you may ask. So I think that the core element of progressive web apps is the progressive enhancement. So the app has to work as fast as possible, and the client and the user that is using our application has to see the performance, see the content that he expects from the application as soon as possible. So we really should emphasize the core content that users see at the beginning of every result to any action, and load all the other elements later that are not necessarily needed. But also, what is very important, that the core content should work on all target platforms. So in other words, if your application is a blog, for instance, or a shop, then all the basic features should work on every single device that you are targeting. And content prioritizing can mainly mean loading the content that is visible at a first glance first, so user can somehow see the app and start reading the content, consuming the content, while not visible elements or less important features can be loaded later. And this way, even if our app is loading longer, slower, the user is still kept engaged with the application. So it's never good to have a badly performing application, but always it's better to have some kind of workaround of this issue rather than not having anything at all. And so when you build an application for some target platforms, you have to keep in mind what those platforms are capable of. So each time you are using some feature, especially those modern features, you have to check if you can use it. And if you cannot, because, for instance, modern JavaScript is not supported by that platform, or there are some features that are not supported, there are some tricks to overcome these issues. For instance, using Babel, which mostly transpiles your code to the pre-selected JavaScript standard, so it can be run on older browsers. Also, performance is very, very important thing. There already were some good presentations about performance. You got a lot of content in the internet about performance, so I'd like to only highlight some most important ones. So in the modern era, where you use all the modern frameworks that render content from JavaScript, you often find some cases when the JavaScript code is transported to the client, but it's not actually being executed. And those parts can be split from the core content and then fetched later if they are used. Or maybe you can even find some code that is not executed at all, a dead code. So the coverage tool in Google Chrome, which is rarely used, sadly, is a very good tool to spot stuff like that. And you can use it to split your code and fetch it later. By the way, sorry for using the black theme, but many of you may not know that Chrome DevTools have now the black theme, so I highly recommend switching it on if you like black IDE. Other things are, for instance, optimizing your assets or choosing lighter dependencies, and bundle phobia is a very good source of information what dependencies you can replace with some lighter alternatives. Also, SVGs are good, and you always want to prefer some SVGs rather than standard images, unless you want to support some super old browsers, for which you can set fallbacks. And finally, you definitely want to use cache. It doesn't matter if it's browser cache, if it's CDN cache, all sorts of caches. Use them all whenever possible because it saves time, money, and resources. So it's a very good thing for your application because it makes the application more performant. But you're not here to hear about performance. You are here to hear about the features. So let me tell you a story about a visionary. You may know this guy. Maybe it's not the best quality because these were recordings in 480p from June 11th, 2007. So this is Steve Jobs, 18 days before the release of iPhone, and he had a dream. He had a dream of web applications that run the same way as native applications that can use all the features of Web 2.0, fetch data with Ajax, integrate with all the hardware that a smartphone has to offer, are easy to update, are easy to distribute. And that idea was in 2007. To put it in perspective, it was 12 years from today. So they had a pretty neat advantage, and they probably used it well. Let's find out. So the most important part of mobile-friendly application that you want to use like a native application is probably the web app manifest. And it's super simple to create it. You actually need like 6 lines of code. So you create a manifest, you add a link to your HTML page, and you're good to go. So can we use it? Let's find out. Internet Explorer, nope. Edge, nope. Firefox, nope. And all the Safaris as well, nope. So there are some fallbacks, because we have to think about fallbacks. And on Safari, actually, there is a way to save application offline, and it's not prompt like on Android, but still, you are theoretically capable of saving the application using it from your desktop. And there are some meta tags that you can put in the head to kind of customize it, but it's not that well customizable as on other platforms. Another fallback is hybrid apps, and they have been covered already, so no need to duplicate it. Then we have service workers. So in other words, it's just additional thread for JavaScript that is in browsers, and basically all the requests that are coming from browser to the server are going through that service worker, through that additional thread, which has access to cache and push notifications, so you can play around with these requests and handle them in different kinds, whatever suits you. So service workers are complex and very simple at the same time. If you want a basic service worker, then you just throw some code, and preferably with checking if service workers are supported, and it installs the service worker itself. And the service worker is just a file, a JavaScript file that is being executed. It has a few hooks that you want to exploit in order to make use of service workers. For instance, install is a very good hook to cache some stuff, so your application will later be available offline. Then you also want to utilize fetch hook, which might be used, for instance, for being a proxy for requests, and the responses can be replaced if there is already a content that is cached. But it's a very basic cache fast strategy, and actually, as you can see, you cannot really add the result from network to the cache. And there are some other strategies. These are very basic ones, like network fast or cache fast. And you basically want either ask the network fast, and if the network doesn't work or it's taking too long, then you ask the cache for result, or maybe you want to serve the response from the cache fast and then ask the network, because the response from network will usually be slower, will take longer to obtain that result. There are also some hybrid strategies and much more to read. So if you are already bored with service workers, then there is no point in wasting your time. If you are, however, interested in service workers, then here are 3 great sources on knowledge of service workers. So I highly recommend checking them out. And by the way, the slides will be available on my Twitter about 3 to 5 minutes after the presentation, so you can grab the presentation there. There are also other uses of service workers, like automatically updating the content of the application in the background, so user can always use the latest content from selected areas of the application. And we have access to push notifications, so it's another mechanism for engaging our users. And finally, we have possibility to use service workers as a load balancer, or even collecting the data of users using our application when they are offline. So it's pretty useful, and you can be very creative with many use cases. for service workers. Of course, creating them manually is very exhausting, and we don't want to Google it and copy paste. So we can use some third-party tools that can generate the service workers for us, and we just configure the strategy from the set of most commonly used ones, and we set which files we want to pre-cache, and the generators will take care of for us. So the most popular one is Workbox, and I highly recommend it. Some time ago, there were some alternatives, but nowadays everybody is using Workbox. So that's the best solution. And it's all cool, but can I use it? You can, except the Internet Explorer, and there isn't really a fallback. So sorry, Internet Explorer, no service workers for you. There are some pitfalls and caveats. If you get some experience with service workers, you may face them. For instance, if you want your application using service worker and offsite browsing to be protected with basic auth, because, for instance, your client requires it, then you may face a problem because service workers are not capable of prompting any pop-ups like alerts or, for instance, inputs to provide the password to the website. So at first, when the service worker isn't installed, then you will be asked for the password as usual, but later when the password expires and the page is still cached in the service worker, then you will face some issues. And I personally haven't found a workaround for that. Usually we are telling the client that it is how it is, and he will have to clear the cache or disable the service worker if he wants to visit the website after some time. And other things that you have to be aware of are that service workers require SSL or TLS to make it work with your remote environments, remote servers, but on localhost, they are fortunately not required. And there will be some cases like redirects that you will have to handle manually because of the caching. Unless you are not using caching, then you don't have to care about redirects. But usually you don't want to cache redirects. You want to cache the final result. And you can get some loops if service worker is badly implemented. And finally, some time ago, there was also some issue with versioning. Fortunately, nowadays we have Workbox and Webpack plugin for Workbox that take care of that for us. So there is no problem anymore, unless you are doing it manually. Finally, we have push notifications. Who doesn't love push notifications, right? We are being attacked with them every day from almost every website. And it's personally, I think it's sad that such a great feature is being used in such a bad way, but well, we all are humans, and it was inevitable. But anyway, push notifications, they are basically they are like a subscription system, and you have to have a remote server that will accept your subscription requests. And when you grant the access to the server, to the subscription server, then the server will send you the content of push notification whenever somebody publishes a new notification. And if you ask me if you can use it, you can use everywhere except usual Internet Explorer. and unfortunately Safari, both desktop and mobile one. So fallbacks, of course. If you really need some kind of notifications for iOS, then you probably want to go with hybrid apps. But there are also some other channels of communicating with users, like analog letters or email newsletter. So definitely you shouldn't rely with communication with your customers on something that is not fully supported. You should rather choose another channel. And there are also many other, mainly hardware platform-specific features that are worth covering, but we have very limited time. So you can simply read what your target devices, what APIs they offer, and depending on your needs and the customer requirements, you can read more about specific features. We cannot forget about the UI, because if our UI will not be proper, will not feel like an app, then it won't help that you make it installable on desktop and you hide the browser bar on the top. It still will feel like a website, not like an app. So we cannot forget about that. And PWA is also a workaround for many restrictions and politic decisions that we all face nowadays. For instance, if your country gets blocked by another country, or other scenario where your app is abusing some weird rules of a store, and you cannot add your application there, then you are very limited in terms of users pool, unless you have some other channels of distribution your application. And PWA is a solution for that, because you don't require any store for distributing your application. All you have to do is just find a way to make the user visit your website, and after second visit, he will be prompted to install the app as a native app on desktop, or an app that looks like so. So, to summarize everything, PWA is not only about offline browsing. PWA is not only about service workers or push notifications. PWA is basically any website that works on multiple platforms, multiple types of devices. So in worst case scenario, if you have a responsive website, I would say it's already a PWA app. It's just not very progressive, but slightly, at least slightly it is. And you have to remember about prioritizing the core content. And you have to keep in mind that performance is crucial for the application. Doesn't matter if it's PWA or not, but in case of mobile native-like applications, performance is especially key part of the application. You can use Webpack plus Bubble to provide compatibility to your code. So it's a very useful, handy way of taking care for you automatically, so you don't have to, pay attention too much. Of course, older browsers will lack service workers, but let's be honest, who uses Internet Explorer 11 these days and expects the application to work offline, right? Graceful degradation on older devices is something that you should think of and be aware. So the worse your target device is, the more attention you should pay to deliver enough features that allow the application to be used as intended. So the content will be there. Maybe some, features, some less important features will not be there, but the core content should work and should be performant. And finally, can I use is your friend, and I highly recommend checking it out. For more information, more sources of PWA knowledge, there are a few sources mentioned here. So if you are interested in implementing PWA, then I highly recommend checking them out because they post every week, every month, very interesting articles about PWA. And not only, these are very, very good articles. So that would be it from me. If you have any questions, then please contact me on Twitter, or we can talk after the presentation. Thank you very much.